Welcome back to the channel, everyone. We have two things to be excited about today. As you can see by the title, we're breaking down the NFC North, and this is talking about what I expect, what I think will happen based on what did or did not happen in the offseason, and how some of these teams' rosters stack against each other. How did some of these teams perform against each other in the previous season? And also, the second thing to be excited about, what to expect. Talking about that before we get straight into this video, episode 4 will be released tomorrow. Getting in the final stages of watching that film for the Dallas Cowboys. We got some things going on, looking at the editing, all of these things for this video. It will be a special one, and I will link the previous 3 episodes in the description if you want to check those out. See how we go about business within this series and kind of get a feel. So when we talk about episode 4 tomorrow, you'll be right on track, you'll be on pace, and you'll understand how we're going about the video. Now, why are the Detroit Lions on my screen? This is my number 1 team in the NFC North. That's predictive. That's based on last season, some of the things I'm looking at. And I think everything is stacking up. Now, we look at the weapons here at the depth chart. We know the coaching staff, Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, those guys. Jared Goff, love him at the quarterback position. And I think he can easily rival for the best quarterback in this division because we talk about it and we look at all these pieces that fit together. And I think when we come down to the overall analysis, the quarterback does kind of drive the win-loss record. And I think this is a team that, with the quarterback they have, with Jared Goff, he won't negatively affect anything. I think if anything, he adds to it. Now, he's not a Mahomes. He's not a Burrow. He's not one of those guys ranked at the top, but he is a very solid quarterback, had a great year last year, and I'm expecting that same thing, having some additional weapons with him this year. Now, you lost to DJ Chark, and that's something that you're going to miss. But got J-Mo coming back after the 6-game suspension. Got Josh Reynolds. Got Khalif Raymond, Marvin Jones Jr., Amon-Ra St. Brown, the star of this receiving core. All of these guys, and we know the running backs. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. I think this is a team that will still run the football. And basically, a lot of what we're going to do, we're going to have those 2 tight end sets. We got a Brock Wright. We got a Sam Laporta. We got a dominant offensive line. And then once we play action off of that, so many different things, so many different ways we can attack secondaries with this receiving core because we have intermediate pass catchers. We have contested catchers in a Marvin Jones, in a Josh Reynolds, a bigger bodied receiver, all of these guys. So we can do some different things to these defenses. Ben Johnson, you know he likes to do different things to everybody. So having that, and I think about it now, talking about the record last year. This is a team, they only lost to the Minnesota Vikings. They swept the Green Bay Packers, they swept the Chicago Bears, and they lost 1 game to the Minnesota Vikings. Now, the Minnesota Vikings, we're going to get into them later, another interesting team. But looking at this defense as well, how will this defense stack up? And I think this is a team that I talked about in my what to expect. There's a lot to be expected out of this defense, kind of expecting a shift from a defense who was terrible last year. A terrible defense last year, but you're bringing that now this year, and Aaron Glenn coming into another season has a lot of weapons to work with. Aiden Hutchinson, will he blossom into that star pass rusher in the NFL? Had a great rookie season. How can he capitalize and work and expand off of that? I think he has the mindset. I think he has the pass rush arsenal to do so. Love what he does in the run game. Very technically sound. Looking at Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, a big-time playmaker, gets his hands on the football. Cameron Sutton, a guy who came over from my Pittsburgh guys, now on the Detroit Lions. Love him for that team. And really a lot of different things. Love the safety room. The linebacker room is something we're going to have to wait and see a little bit. Derek Barnes, Malcolm Rodriguez, Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell. Something we're going to have to wait and see a little bit. But I do think the overall essence of this team, expecting that same top 10 to top 5 offense, expecting basically an entire shift on the defense, worst to first, not literally first, but you understand this is the team that went from being the bottom of the barrel to expecting to be in the thick of things when we're talking about defensive rankings. Now, I want to touch on those Minnesota Vikings, and this is a really interesting team. Now, when I look at the Green Bay Packers and I look at the Chicago Bears, and you say, how are the Minnesota Vikings the number 2 team? Well, I think that there's still a lot of talent here. A lot of raw talent on the board, some things to be excited about. Kevin O'Connell, having him in another season, I feel really confident, but I'm also weary a little bit. I'm not fully buying into this team, but I do think there's some good things. I'm not a Kirk Cousins hater. I do think Kirk Cousins is a pretty solid quarterback. Now, how far can he take you? That's yet to be seen, because Kirk Cousins at big-time games, he sometimes falls apart. And we look at the defense. We know the defense was bad, but also understanding Kirk Cousins, I watched some of those games and I rewatched some of those games, and I think that you get in those 3 and outs early. Now the defense is on the field. The defense is already not the greatest defense. So you're putting them into positions and you're running. The play that I hated for the Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins, anytime he turned around, he tossed it directly back to Dalvin Cook, and he just ran straight up the middle. I don't know what that run play was, but I saw it way too much, and it never really worked. I saw the Chicago Bears stuff it. I saw the Detroit Lions stuff it. And the Cowboys, as I was watching their game, I saw them stuff it as well. Terrible run play. But I do think with this team now, you brought in a Jordan Addison, a first-round receiver, some guy's first receiver in the draft, depending on who you talk to, a guy who can play inside out. And you look beyond that, we see a Jalen Reagor, a Brandon Powell, some of these complementary receivers. And I think that Adam Thielen, a pretty solid receiver. We could say that he's past his prime. He went on to Carolina. We wish him the best there. But Jordan Addison, can he give us that same, if not a little more production than Adam Thielen? I think that's the question that you're asking, because Justin Jefferson, he's a top 3 receiver. We have to send the coverage to him. We have to scheme for him. We have to put our best guys on him. We have to follow him. We have to do whatever we can to stop Justin Jefferson. So with that being said, TJ Hawkinson, I think he's a pretty good blocker, but he's also going to help in that passing game. Has to clean up some of those drops, because I'm still seeing some of that, which I saw from Detroit with that in-division trade. But the run game. Now, Alexander Mattison, I like him. And we talk about running backs are a dime a dozen. And I think that some people say that, but they don't really mean it, because running backs are a dime a dozen. Who on this roster is Dalvin Cook? Now, I really, really, really like Dwayne McBride. I saw what he did at UAB, and I think that he's going to be the key to this running back room, because I see Todd Chandler, I see these other guys in the room, but I think that him, with a 3-headed or a 2-headed monster, he can be that guy. Run hard after contact, does all of these things. Now, we haven't really saw the catching arsenal from him, but I think that UAB just didn't throw the ball to him a lot. Does he have clean hands? Does he catch the ball naturally? That's some of the things we're going to learn and see in training camp. We saw some things at OTAs and all of that, but I want to see it with the pads on. And running backs are dime a dozen. I don't buy into that take, because I look at these rosters and you say a running back is a dime a dozen, right? But then you get a running back who's nothing like Dalvin Cook. You get a running back who's nothing like a Saquon Barkley, who's nothing like a Derrick Henry, like a Nick Chubb. The thing is, when we say running backs are a dime a dozen, it's not that we can just replace this one special back. It's that we can get these collection of guys. We can get this combination of guys, and we can still have a good rushing attack. I think that's what people are trying to say, and it's saying that running backs come a dime a dozen. That's not necessarily true. For the Atlanta Falcons, we could say Bijan. We could say that was a bad pick, whatever you want to say. I think for Arthur Smith and that scheme, it was a great pick. But we could say that was a bad pick because running backs come a dime a dozen, because Al Greer just ran for 1,000 yards. And we could say we could put him in Cordell. We can get the same thing we could get out of one Bijan Robinson. That's not saying Bijan isn't special. That's saying the combination of guys will make this better. I think this combination of guys can still have a solid rushing attack, although none of them may equate to a Dalvin Cook. That's how I feel about the run game, and that's kind of important talking about this team, because it was so essential for them. Coming off of a Justin Jefferson, coming off of throwing the ball to Adam Thielen, Hawkinson, these guys were very special, and they threw the ball to Dalvin Cook. So we're going to see how they throw the ball to these running backs, but I just want to touch on that. Now, this defense. I think this may be rivaling with one of the poor defenses in the division. Now, they brought in Brian Flores. That is a very special power move. I love Brian Flores. Like what he didn't stay with us long in Pittsburgh. We know what happened in Miami, but he's still a great coach by all means necessary. And we think about what the Miami Dolphins have been doing when he was there and what he did as the linebackers coach in Pittsburgh. But now he's here. I'm expecting a lot of blitz. I'm expecting blitz, zero coverage, man coverage, cover one, those types of things. And does he have the personnel to do it? Now, I think that he's going to get the best out of these players, and he's going to kind of be multiple in his schemes. He's going to let these guys work to what fits for them. I don't think because you can't do that. As a first-year defensive coordinator, you can't come in and say, run my scheme. I'm ruling with the iron fist. I don't care what your best talents are. I don't care what you're best at. Are you a press corner? Are you a zone corner? I don't care because you're running my scheme. I don't think this is that type of deal. But I do think You brought in a Byron Murphy Jr., brought him in from Arizona. Can he be that guy? He's on a 1-year deal, so can he prove himself, set himself up for a long-term deal? Cam Bynum at the safety, Harrison Smith being the vet in that room, Andrew Booth another year, Mekhi Blackman, the guy who was drafted out of LSU. How can this work, and how effective will they be? Because they're young corners. They're a really young room. Talk about Harrison Smith being the veteran in that room. And I think last year, it was just bad. It was very bad. I watched a lot of Minnesota Vikings. I don't even know how I got to watching Minnesota Vikings football, but I watched a lot of games, all 22 film on this team. Patrick Peterson. And, I wasn't really a big fan of him. It was a lot of busted coverages. I won't say these guys just were the worst talented. They had no talent. They had no corners. It was busted coverages. And can we put some of that on Donatel? Can we say that these things weren't communicated enough from the defensive coordinator? Can we say some of these play calls, did we really know what we were doing? If we're running these quarters coverages, if we're running these certain things, and we know what route concepts are that we're getting, how can we work against that? Because these offensive coordinators, they know defense too. They know the rules. They know that if I run a certain route right here and I bring something underneath him, he can't break on this underneath route because he has to get deep because he has that quarter of the field. Those are the little intricate details, but the types of things that we have to know and that we have to account for this defense. I like the pass rush. Can we say that Marcus Davenport kind of negates some of the negative effect from losing to Zadarius Smith? I think that may be something we can talk about, that we can debate. I like Zadarius Smith, but I also like Marcus Davenport. I like him as a run defender. Had some sacks last year. Can he do that same thing alongside of Danielle Hunter? Now, the linebacker room, not a huge fan of the linebacker room. I like Jordan Hicks, but outside of that, I think it's a lot of guys who have to prove themselves. So Brian Asamoah, Ivan Pace Jr., I liked him in the process, but I have to see some of these guys prove themselves. That's going to come with that training camp type of thing. But I do think overall, it's not as many question marks as I have for these next two teams, and that's why they're there. Now, Chicago Bears fans, I love this team. And I think it's a very talented team. I think you have a lot of things to look up for. You may even be the second team in this division when it's all said and done. But, like I said, you have more uncertainties than a Minnesota Vikings, than a Detroit Lions. So when I look at that and when I think about that, talking about it now, I like Justin Fields. I like what I've saw so far out of him and DJ Moore. Love the running back room. I'll take it as far as love because you have 3 or 4 guys who I think can all make major impacts. I like Roshan, I like Travis, Khalil, Deonta. Saw what he did at Carolina. Now, the receiving room. Darnell Mooney, he's back on track, looking like he's getting healthier. He's going to be ready for day one, hopefully. But got to chase Claypool. He's also dealing with some things right now, but he'll be all right. And DJ Moore, the big-time guy. Tyler Scott, what will his impact be early, being that draft pick, burner out of Cincinnati. Tight end, Cole Kmet, Robert Tonyan, got him from an in-division team. In the offensive line, I think that's going to be the biggest thing. How quickly can these guys gel? How quickly can they get to the point where they're picking up protections, where they're looking at stunts, they're calling out different things that they're seeing? How quickly? I like the talent in the room, but how quickly? That's my biggest thing. I think this will be a run team, just like it was last year, the second in rush yards. Rush attempts as well, to add that in there, because not only are they getting rush yards, they're going to run the football, whether it works or whether it doesn't. Luckily, last year it worked, but bringing in Nate Davis, one of the best blocking guards in football. Darnell Wright, we know the monster that he was at Tennessee. Tevin Jenkins, he's also a monster, kicking him back into that guard position. Brax, Cody, that type of thing. Best 5 guys, and I really like it. But how quickly? Now, the defense. Travis Gibson, and I talked about these guys. This was my first episode on what to expect. Again, those are linked in the description. You can check them out. But I really like this defense, and I think that it's nothing like the defense that we saw last year. Now, the Chicago Bears didn't perform great on defense last year. That could be attributed to the defensive line. That could be attributed to the linebackers. We just didn't have everything that we needed. You got what you need now. And I talked about it. The thing that I want to see this team get is that star pass rusher, because I like what they did so far. I like the interior. You picked up a Pickens, you picked up a Gervon Dexter. But if you get that star guy off of the edge, this defense will be next level. I like the corners. I like Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson being one of my upper echelon guys in that draft process, around a Julius Brents, around a Joey Porter, a Cam Smith, those types of guys. I looked at them in that same essence. And to add to that, Jaquan Brisker. Talked about him being one of those breakout safeties in 23. I really like what I saw from him last year, but it's also some depth here. Some guys who were playing more snaps than they probably should have last year, but that's going to help you because they're depth pieces now. You look at a Vildor, you look at a Williamson. These guys played critical, heavy snaps. But now this year, Eddie Jackson is back. We brought in a Tyreek Stevenson. We still got Jalen Jones, these types of guys. So now those guys who played heavy snaps, that's our depth. So that allows us to have a rotation. Injuries won't be a huge thing in the secondary because I think it's deep. I think you have talent there, and I like the room. Now, the linebackers. This is not the same linebacker room at all. No Nicholas Morrow. Roquan Smith got traded mid-season. We got Tremaine Edmonds, and what we want to do, I talked about it 50 million different times. He wants to run the pole in Tampa 2. They love that coverage. They love cover 2. They love all of that, and he's going to be able to match. He's going to be able to run with the number 3 receiver, all of the things that I talked about and what to expect. But TJ Edwards, Zach Sanborn, that's kind of, those are the guys, but we look at it, we're kind of running more of that 4-2-5 that all teams are running at this point in the NFL, and I like it. I like Noah Sewell is being a depth piece, but how can he really fit into this scheme? Probably going to back up TJ Edwards based on what I saw of him from Oregon. Now, defensive line, like the interior, just talked about that. But the edge, DeMarcus Walker, I saw him play a lot of inside for the Tennessee Titans, so I'm interested to see how can he pass rush strictly off of the edge. Now, when we get into these passing sets, we got guys we can kick out to the edge, and we can bring DeMarcus Walker in down to a 3-tech, in down to a 4-eye. But how will we do it? How will it look? It's all those things. Now, Travis Gibson, Dominique Robinson. I think these are two guys we're expecting a jump. I saw some solid things last year, but it's always the but. I think they can get better. Travis Gibson, I really like him. A long guy, solid on the edge, solid against the run. And I think about it when I looked at his team, their pass rush, because it was kind of non-existent last year. But when it was a guy who was winning his one-on-one matchup, it was usually Travis Gibson for this team. So with that being said, DeAnthony Jones, a sleeper in this pass rush rotation. How can these guys get a pass rush? Just a solid guy. And I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's the last guy on the depth chart. If you can rush that passer, talking about a team we saw ranked number 1, James Houston. If we were going off hierarchy and draft class and where you were coming out the practice squad, where you went to HBCU, we talk about that. We don't care if you can rush the passer because that's so intricate to this scheme. That's so critical, so significant to what they need to be able to run that Tampa 2. Get that pass rush. Make those route concepts play off differently. That's what I'm focused on, and that's what I'm looking at. Now, I really like this team. And I said they could easily slide into if the Minnesota Vikings fall off. They could easily slide into 4 if the Green Bay Packers get something done. I'm not talking about the Green Bay Packers. You still got Joe Barry. You brought up the offensive coordinator. You still got Matt LaFleur, but I think there's still some question marks for me with this team, and I think that's why they're 4th because I don't know. I like the talent on this roster, and like I said, it's high points. It's a lot to look forward to for all of these teams, whether you end up being good or whether you don't end up being good, and that's really the objective point of view from this thing. But Jordan Love, I like what I saw in that Philadelphia game, and it's all about getting better. Matt LaFleur, all of these guys are coming out saying he's better, saying he's processing quicker, and that's going to be how he wins from the pocket. He's not one of these guys. Now, understand, he can get out of the pocket. He can get on the run. I'm talking about play out boots, sprint outs, all of these things that he can do. He has the skill set to do that, but with Jordan Love, I think processing is going to be how he wins football games. Being able to get the football out quick from snap to throw. What is the speed and what is the timing of that? Looking at this run game, I think the run game is still going to be the bread and butter for this team because with Aaron Rodgers, when he was winning those MVPs, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon were running a heck out of the football. I think they still want to do that. I think they still will do that, especially with this offensive line. Now, you also have some weapons. You brought in the Musgrave, you brought in a Tucker Kraft, all of these guys, and I think that with a Jaden Reed, with a Christian Watson, with a Romeo Dobbs, it's weapons and it's weapons and it's weapons on top of weapons, but how quickly? How quickly can it gel? And you also got one of the steals in the draft, a guy that I looked at, and you can also check out. Steve Smith had some really nice things to say, but watch the film on a Grant DeBose. Went to a smaller school, but one of those guys who's going to go up and get the football, knows how to settle in zone coverage, and can win one-on-one. I think a sleeper in this draft and a guy who we're going to see in training camp, maybe make some plays, maybe stand out from the rest. But with the offensive line, with the offense, I think it's talent there. I'm not saying this is going to be a horrible team, but understanding that They didn't beat the Detroit Lions last year. They split with the Minnesota Vikings, and they did sweep the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears didn't win a division game last year, but I just want to see it. I think that's the biggest thing. And I'm not, like I said, with these rankings, with this hierarchy, it's not saying that a team can't get it done, that a team can't win in the division, that they won't be good. But I have to see it. Like I said, it's not too many changing pieces on the offensive line, which is a good thing to look at. You still got Bakhtiari. Can he stay healthy for a full season? Really optimistic about this team. That's the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway. Like I said, you brought up the offensive coordinator. You still got Joe Barry on the defense. And let's talk about that defense. You still got a Kenny Clark, a Slayton, a Devontae Wyatt, and Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary coming back this season. This is all actually a good team. Seriously, this is a good football team. They have talent at all of the pieces. We look at Darnell Savage. We look at Jonathan Owens, Rudy Ford, who got the 2 picks on Dak Prescott. But anyway, Rasul Douglas, Jair Alexander, all of these guys, I love it. Eric Stokes still being on this team. Tavarius Moore. It's a lot of talent we can look at for this team, but I think the biggest thing is defensive coordinator, man. I don't know if Joe Barry is the guy that can get you over the hump. You've never been a horrible defense, but you've never been a great defense. And you look at the scheme, you got the penetrating 3-tech. You got Kenny Clark, who can take on double teams, who can be that guy in the run game. Devontae Wyatt having that quick, explosive agility off of the snap of the football. TJ Slayton being that guy. Preston Smith being a guy who can rush from speed to power. Quay Walker, an athletic, freakish linebacker, has to get his mind right. Has some mind blunders in that last game of the season, and we did see that. But with Rashawn Gary, all of these things, we have a scheme that's in place and that should work. But I don't think the defensive coordinator and Joe Barry is the guy to get it done. There were some defensive coordinators and guys on the market, but you didn't jump at any of them. Devondre Campbell still being a guy who was an all-pro, was a Pro Bowler. And I mean, from a talent perspective, we can easily say this is a team that could jump to 2. And it's really that number 2 spot. I like the Detroit Lions, and I think they have a pretty complete team right now. I don't think there's too many holes. The Minnesota Vikings, we've saw it from the Minnesota Vikings with Kevin O'Connell, so we can say that is kind of something to look at. But for this team, just the question marks, really like the talent. I'm going to leave you with that thought because I want to know what you guys really think about what I have to say about the NFC North, about these divisions, and how do you feel about what I said? Not more so the ranking, but what I specifically said in my analysis of these teams. How do you feel about that? Because I think it's pretty accurate. Like a lot of things from these teams, and I think all of these are good teams, but it may not be everybody's year. Let me know what you think in the comments. That's going to do it for today. Don't forget what to expect. You're going to see it at the end screen of this video. But we got a lot of things coming up on this channel. It's never the off season with 24-hour sports, and now we out.